Hello, Scott. Got your carburetors that you sent in for us to deal with. We can do a cold start test, and I really mean cold start. These things have cold soaked overnight. All right. Before I put this on the tripod, let's go over a few things. Idle mixture screws. These don't take too much to adjust, just a few degrees adjustment. This idle mixture screw is blanked off, and the same as on the second barrel of the second carburetor, they're blanked off. And the reason for that is because, as you know, these things have been sleeved internally. We did not do it. Don't know who did, but when they sleeved them, they did not drill the holes for these, which is acceptable. And so the only adjustment is going to be here, and the other adjustment, of course, is your idle speed. And the only other adjustment you can make is you can adjust these levers up and down so that they meet with the cable coming down for your choke. These things, let's see, in terms of mounting them, I'm sure you know this, but you have to have wave washers in here along with your factory gaskets. I'll send you information about that. Mount the carburetors loosely, put your air log in place, and then tighten the carburetors down, pull the air log off. And the reason for that is because there's enough variation in the movement in the carburetors that the air log will not fit if the carburetors are not where they're supposed to be. Always use two 17mm wrenches, one to hold the fitting in the float bowl, the other one to work this swivel fitting. The carburetors have to be disconnected from each other for final adjustment, and the only adjusting you can do is when the carburetors are warmed up. These things were seriously messed up. As you know, you contacted us about part falling off, one of these stop tabs falling off. And the reason it fell off is because absolutely nothing on these carburetors was tied down. It was tight. I don't know what the deal was, but they just put everything together loose, and that was just the beginning of parts that were going to start falling off. These things were seriously messed up. Throttle shafts were worn. So we got new throttle shafts in here, even new choke shafts. The old choke shafts were worn out, and that's pretty hard to do. None of the mating surfaces were flat. We've got new factory gaskets. Your gaskets were factory, but they were hard. But there's one non-factory gasket. This check valve in this carburetor did not even have a ball in it, so it was not a check valve. It was just straight through, which would have meant you had a constant flow of fuel going through up the accelerator pump discharge nozzle. Trying to think what else. We've given you, instead of G55s, we've given you G65 idle jets to improve transition from idle to full run. There was a whole list of things that were wrong with these carburetors, and it'll just take too long to go through everything. I'll write it down for you, but the other points. Well, for instance, these are bolts that are coming through here instead of studs. They got bolts in here. I don't know what they did here, but we didn't touch these things. That's a strange setup right there. What else was there? Trying to think. Oh well, it's. Oh yeah, I know the critical thing we did right down here. This little guy right here. These are off of an early car, and the early style mechanism down here for artificially closing the second barrel was a non-adjustable item when the carburetors were installed, so we had to take the shafts out to install this part here, which gives you the ability to adjust the pressure that this screw puts on a pin on the second barrel to artificially close the second barrel once you've floored the carburetors. So the carburetors are floored, both throttles are open, you back off on the throttle, this linkage here closes the first barrel, and this pin, this screw right here, pushes on this pin, and that artificially closes or mechanically closes the second barrel. And then once it gets close to closing, along with the counterweight here, that helps close it. And also once the butterfly closes up. The vacuum helps close it the rest of the way. That's right, there's another thing on the sleeving. They went to a great deal of trouble to sleeve the second barrel. I mean, all throats, which was not really necessary on the first barrel, but the second barrel is critical, and they sleeved it, but they used the original butterflies, and the fit between the butterfly and the sleeve is pitiful. And you can tell this by holding up the carburetor to the sun and looking through the throat here, and you can see how much light is coming from around the butterfly up inside there. There should be no light coming through there. The more the light comes through, the more air can be processed, and the less well they're going to run. And these are acceptable, considering what they did was actually just barely duplicated factory standards in the 50s. Our machining techniques now do a much better job, and we can achieve much better tolerances, but these guys, whatever they did, is just, came close to meeting factory standards. And by that I mean the amount of airflow that's going to go through here. You want as little airflow as possible. In the factory, usually achieved around 2 to 3, and then because you don't want the air going through here when you're idling. And then at idle, you want have the airflow going through here to be balanced. And what we use for that is the synchrometer here, and that right out of the box, this one fits the throats just fine. So what we're going to do is show you how to balance these things and how you're going to adjust them to your carburetor. You're going to be doing the idle mixture screw to adjust them to your carburetor, to your engine rather. So let me get this set up on the tripod, and then we'll get this show on the road. All that, and you know what, I really should give you more information on this part here, on this bracket right here, this linkage. What you want is for this thing to close the second barrel, but not push on the pin down here so much that it artificially opens the first barrel, which is what can happen if you screw this thing down. You can actually start opening the first barrel, and that'll screw up your idle. And of course, this relationship here, sorry, when you adjust your idle speed here, this relationship here can change, because as you can imagine, as you screw this down or up, it changes where this screw is going to hit on the pin down here. And what you're trying to achieve is when the first barrel is closed properly, you can come over here, you can just barely move the counterweight. That's the amount of play, almost imperceptible. Alright. I know this is taking too long, but I want to make sure you guys have as much information as possible so you'll be successful. Let's check and see. I'm trying to get this where you can see all the numbers on the throat here. Okay. All right, let's see, batteries attached. I don't have the fast idle set. That's another thing I've got to do. You do that once you're finished with the carburetors. The adjustment for the fast idle setting is 15 thousandths on this little pin back here. We'll do that when the carburetors come off. Right now, I'm just going to choke it, and so we won't have a fast idle, but we'll be able to start it. And doing a fast cold start, see what happens. All right, goose it. forgot to mention the carburetor drains. They had helicoil these with a 6x1 helicoil, which is not correct. It's supposed to be 6x0.75, but so I had to make you special drain hollow bolts to go in here. Most of the threads on the carburetors are a 0.75 or French pitch. So there's the cold aisle. Not too bad considering. Now we're going to warm it up. You can see why they have drains on these things, because they like to flood. You can see where the gas drip down here, it's smoking. That's why they have carburetor drains on these things, because they're notorious for not flooding, but seeping fuel. And it's not a fire hazard, it just stinks. And that's why they have drains, that drain the fuel down past the block. Waiting for the carburetors to come up to temp. And my temperature gauge going in. Waiting for the thermostat to open. You can see it at steady state, no surging, cooling nicely. That's 1500 RPM. Nice acceleration. And these are still pretty cold. Thermostat just opened. Alright, now we can adjust our carburetors. Make sure I got this where you can see it. Alright. First thing we do is, well, we got our idle up here. Our electronic tack. Alright, so we're going to disconnect the throttle linkage here. Now we're going to start adjusting things. First of all, we're going to check to see how our flow is going through here. There's 2.5, 3, 2.5. So as I say, all they did was, and this is 1.5. So that's, they pretty much duplicated factory settings, factory machine work. Alright, so now we want to balance our carburetors. We want to get, we're at 4 here, and 4 here. Obviously I've already adjusted these things. Now then, this gives us an idle of about 600 RPM. That's a little low, but I like to use that as a starting point to see how well these things will adjust if they can run that slowly. Now we're going to do the idle mixture screw. It doesn't take much, and what you're going to do is you're going to screw it in until it starts to stumble, screw it out till it starts to stumble, and get your midpoint. And on these things it doesn't take much at all to achieve that goal. Just a few degrees of movement. Now we're starting to die. Back it out. Starting to die. Screw it back in. Get our midpoint. Now I'm using the tachometer to get our midpoint. In fact, I'll show you what I'm doing. There's the tack. So, holding the throttle closed. Yeah. That's why you hold the throttle closed. And adjusting in. Idle drops off immediately. Back that, idle picking up, then starts to drop off again. So we go back to get our highest idle speed. Do the same thing over here in the first barrel. You have to go back and forth. See the idle picking up, now it's starting to drop off. So we go back to where we have it around 7 and change. 7. Alright. So keep it there for the time being. The next thing you need to do is be able to snap your linkage in place without changing the idle. Nothing changed to speak of. And now we're going to blip the throttle, and if we make sure we don't have it too lean, so it doesn't, if it pops back, we're too lean, we'll back out on the idle mixture screws. Now that'll change because the second barrels don't seal very well. You push on the counterweights and get it back down to where it was. And that also has to do with those follower screws pushing on the second barrel. I got these just set to where they just barely will touch and close. Check our balance again. Run at 4. Run at 4. Now we'll try a hot start. Considering how crappy these carburetors were to begin with, and how much trouble you had with them, and they turned out pretty well considering. So, like I'd mentioned on the drain screws here, they're a 6 by 0.75 originally, but someone helicoiled these to a 6 by 1, and I got you special bolts, made the bolts on the lathe so that you can attach your drain lines, which you have to do. Most of these screws on here are 0.75 pitch, but a few of them are standard, so you just have to watch out in terms of working with these carburetors. They'll drive you crazy. They got 4 by 0.75, 5 by 0.75, 6 by 0.75 pitch, plus 6 by 1 pitch, and I think that covers it. Just enough to drive you crazy. Oh, an 8 by 1 on the nuts here. Anyway, think I got you some good carburetors that you can the customer can use. Thanks for sending them to us.